What's going on? We're back out in the garage to do some more upgrades on the Miata. Today we are going to be taking out the brake booster system out of the front of the Miata. We are no longer going to be utilizing a booster setup. We are getting rid of that, getting it out of the car. I had too many situations last year drifting where I ran out of booster and basically had no brakes chasing behind the other drivers. A quick rundown on how a brake booster works. It runs off of vacuum, off of the internals of the intake manifold. So when your throttle is closed, it pulls vacuum because the engine is still pulling air in. So it creates a vacuum on that brake booster diaphragm, which assists in your braking. Most of the time when you're using a brake booster system, you're not on throttle while you're applying the brakes. Now with a turbo system, it makes pulling vacuum even worse. So you're pulling that vacuum away from the intake manifold completely, especially when you're on the brakes, to where it sucks the booster dry or basically sucks it empty. So there's no brakes, nothing works how it should be, and then you run into some bad problems. Literally and figuratively could be running into problems. Now when you do a booster delete system, you need to make sure you get the proper sizing of your brake master cylinder. Now most companies already have that all figured out for you, to where all you have to do is click on your make and model and it's ready to go. You don't have to do any calculations, don't have to do any measuring, anything like that. It's all ready for you. You just have to click purchase, comes to your house, you can install it into your car. Now I chose the Chase Bays brake booster delete. It is the single piston. You do need to get the line relocation kit because you are changing the position of your brake master. So I got that as well. I'll show you those real quick. So when we take a look at the booster delete, it basically takes that giant diaphragm that would be sitting behind this plastic reservoir and gets rid of it. Then it mounts directly into the firewall via the 4 bolts that your stock one would sit in. Makes it really simple, and then your line comes off of here to your bias valve and where your relocation line stuff all sets up, and it goes to the driver's side and passenger side of your vehicle. Now when we look at the part numbers for that, hopefully it'll focus for you guys. So this is for the actual single piston delete, like the actual master cylinder and reservoir right there. This is for the Mazda Miata NA and I believe NB, and then your relocation or your line relocation kit right there. Now there's a few different places you could probably get these few things. You can go right to Chase Bays. There's also a couple other stores. I go to Drift HQ for most of my stuff. It just makes things easier. Now your brake master or your brake booster setup in your car is typically right in front of the driver's seat in the engine bay. Now I'll show you that real quick. Now left-hand drive would be on the driver's side, left-hand side. If you have a right-hand drive vehicle, it'd be on the right-hand side of your vehicle. So I'll take a look at that real quick. Well, hold on a second. We got this car in the wrong direction right now. We need to spin this around real quick. So, that being said, need to get this spun around real quick, and then we'll get right to the work. Hey, wait! You're not supposed to be seeing this part. There we go, car's turned around. Now we can get to work taking out this brake booster out of the car so we can get the fresh delete system in. When we looked at the brake booster delete system with the proportioning valve, I forgot to tell you which lines are what. So when you're looking at the proportioning valve, this is actually gonna mount right underneath the master right here. Utilize the bottom bolt of the cylinder, and then the line that goes from the banjo bolt on the front to the top side of the proportion valve on the inlet side is this little guy, the steel line. That should go basically just like this. I'll show you that when we get into the vehicle. Then your first line, the big one, this long one, goes all the way to the passenger side. You'll locate that coming off of the right side of the proportioning valve and going around underneath that. And then it'll go to the passenger side. Then you'll have this medium-sized line that'll come out the bottom left side of the portion right here, go down to the driver front, and then you'll have this small tube that will come out the out right here that goes to the rear brake line. I actually have the hard line disconnected. I ran my braided line for my inline hydro off of that side, so we're gonna just connect that line to that portion, we should be able to just put it right on that AN fitting without having to use that short tube. But when we get to that, we'll kind of figure out if we need it or not. I mean, it doesn't hurt anything to just throw that little extra line. If it does fit without it, we're gonna go without it and just kind of save that extra potential leak point, kind of get rid of 2 fittings and just put the one right onto the proportion valve. So we're gonna start taking this apart real quick. We do need to take out the old hard line that goes across to the passenger side, along with the old hard line that goes to the driver's side. We're gonna lift the front up real quick so that we can loosen all those lines up completely, drain whatever fluid is left in the front, because previous video we had the rear disconnected already, so there's already air in the system. It's a perfect time to do this swap. One thing we'll do before we actually hard mount it into the vehicle as well, Chase Bays does recommend that you bench bleed your master cylinders. It just helps the overall bleeding process when you do have it in the vehicle. Otherwise you're sitting there pumping it a bunch, trying to push all the air out, and it's kind of a hassle. So I'll show you that as well. Basically just hook up a line, then you'll just cycle that piston 10-15 times or so until there's not any air cycling back out. Once you take that out and drain the fluid out of the reservoir, do not push that piston in again. You'll just push any fluid that is in there and bled back out, and you'll have air back in the cylinder again, and your bench bleed was pointless. All right, we should be ready to pull this out. Just like that. This big hunk of junk can get the heck out of here. Good riddance to this thing. Cost me way too many wins last year. Just running out of booster, not being able to slow down, and being basically forced to straighten to slow down behind a car that's going slower than I am. Get this thing in the trash, get the new, better booster delete in here. Now I'll give you guys a size comparison of the two side by side, or pretty close side by side. This big hunk of junk compared to that nice little guy. Big hunk of junk, nice little guy. So now that that brake booster system is out of the vehicle, we need to clean the firewall up a little bit because it's pretty dirty back there. Alright, so to get the bench bleed done on this before we put it into the car, it'll make our life a little easier when we get to bleeding the rest of the lines out. So I don't have like a rubber line to just stick down in here, so we're going to utilize this medium-sized line. Just thread it onto your banjo bolt there so we can get fluid running back through, so we're not wasting the brake fluid. Snug that up and kind of just rest it inside just like that. Got some brake fluid in there. I'll try and hold this so you guys can kind of see, maybe. So you got to be careful that you're not going to spill this all over. Just pump it. It should start pulling fluid in, and you'll see it kind of starting to spray. I'll have to set this down, make it a little easier. Got that bench bled. Now we're gonna slam that thing into the car, get it bolted in, and start getting these lines in place and get this thing knocked out in no time. So before we put that in, I just thought of this. Now the arm that's on the back side of that booster, or the booster delete, both of them have an arm. We want to match that length the best we can to the OEM length, just so the pedal is basically where it was from before, you know? So all I did was take a measurement from the back side where it mounts to the firewall to the center of the hole right here is about 4 5/8 inches. This is for a Miata setup anyways. This can be used on many other types of vehicles. It's basically the same with very little changes. So basically measure off the plate here to the center of the hole, 4 5/8. This has lots of adjustment here for many other vehicles. I believe, like on the box here, I don't know if you can see that, Honda, Nissan, Mazda, Mitsubishi AE86. So it can be used on many different models. That's why there's so much adjustment here on this arm. You want to make sure you get that set somewhat close to what your stock one was. Now that we have that arm adjusted, we can get this sucker in here, keep this project moving. Goes right into those bolt holes with ease. I might have to maybe adjust or move my high pressure oil feed line a little bit, loosen it up and kind of tuck it off to the side, because that proportion valve is going to go right on the bottom. This also could go underneath it. So we'll figure that out when we get there. Now we got this kind of set in here. I'm going to go inside, get the 4 bolts on the back side or the 4 nuts and get it all snug down, and then get that arm attached to the brake pedal itself. So I didn't show this when I took them out, but it's up inside there. So it's kind of a tight squeeze in here, but yeah, that's where it is. Here's the arm. I may have to adjust it just a little bit because of the brake switch that's up there. You want that to be able to actually activate, otherwise your brake lights will come on if you don't have it set quite right. So I might have to adjust that arm out like a 1/16 of an inch to make that hole line up there. But I also need to snug it down first before I do that. Now we got this thing hard mounted in here. It's all ready to go. We got to get the proportioning valve bolted onto the bottom nut on the master here, and then we're going to start adding the lines on. We'll start with the small little stainless line that goes from the actual cylinder to the top side of the proportioning valve, and then feed the rest of it from there. It's just a 13 millimeter in here. Loosen this up. Get that thing bolted on there. It's really nice that they can just add that in. They made sure that the stud for the cylinder is long enough to be able to put the proportioning valve right on the bottom. Makes it nice and neat. There's even a slotted hole so you can slide it up or down, however you want to put this in here. Just kind of hand tighten it first until you get that stainless line on there, so that you got it positioned how you need it. Once you got that snugged on, then you can go from there. I'm talking this little guy right here will go on just like that. So we'll just bring it on over there and slap that thing in there. I want to say it's just a 7/16. You should have technically an AN wrench for it. I don't have those, so I'm just using a normal wrench. Slide this right in here. Get those seated on there, start threading them on together so that it pulls all of it in place. Now that we have that stainless line installed, we got it fully tightened down, and then we have that proportioning valve completely tightened down as well. We can now move on to the braided line. We're going to put the longest one in first. This goes behind the engine, so we're going to install this on the very right side of that proportioning valve, the inside. So there's like a T, and then we're going to go on the driver's side, the very farthest side, and then swoop back and around the back side of the engine over the transmission and get this other side attached down back where the original line basically attached to the control arm. So we'll kind of try and fish this through. It'll be a little tricky to kind of see. So you want the female end with the threads here on this side, on the driver's side. So we'll feed this back through. I don't know if it really matters which direction you feed it from. You kind of have to go down and around and underneath anyways, regardless which way you go. Kind of above and around. The coolant reroute, maybe. Let's go from the other side, it might be easier. That was much easier that way. However, we'll have to kind of move it, maneuver it around. Put this down underneath. Uh-oh, I got brake fluid leaking out. So I got both the driver and passenger side lines screwed into place. I made the mistake of just adding brake fluid into that reservoir before having those lines in. Don't make that same mistake. I had brake fluid running everywhere in the engine bay. Don't do that, it takes the paint off. So, to prevent that, don't put brake fluid in until all the lines are hard mounted, ready to go. Now, we're gonna move on to this next small one. I was hoping I could get away with not using this, but the braided line that goes to my inline hydro is got a 90 on the end of it, and coming out of the firewall down and around, it's just kind of awkward. So instead of doing that, we are gonna utilize this. Now I had to have this fitting. It's kind of like a female to a male little like adapter piece, and it's gonna fit perfectly on this because this is a female and the other side is a female. So you have to have this female to male, male to female adapter in there for that to actually bridge across. So we're gonna throw that in there real quick. Good thing I saved this because I need it right here. So we'll just get this thing attached in here, get that nice and tight, and then the yellow or orangish yellow colored line that goes to the inline will get attached here. This to the proportioning valve, and all the lines are mounted, ready to go. Now that I got all that brake fluid cleaned up because I didn't tighten stuff down properly, let's get this tightened up as well. That should work, and it'll still look somewhat decent. It's a little janky, but that's what I gotta do, adapting lines together that technically are different brands and were not originally meant to go together. They work together though. I'll have to try and maybe figure something else out with this thing. Try and route it down and around. Try and keep it down farther so it's kind of tucked. Otherwise it's just, you know, it's a big floppy line up here with heat shielding because the downpipe is right there. I wonder, I hope my shield is still gonna fit with that. Yeah, we'll find out. Just tuck it under there for now. It'll be alright. Well, alright. I got everything snugged up. Everything is tightened. Everything is now clean because I spilt more brake fluid. I forgot to tighten the nuts or like the ends down by the rotors. My mistake yet again. Don't make the same mistakes that I made. Leave your system dry, minus bench bleeding the cylinder. Leave everything else dry until you have everything tight. Everything must be tight before you start adding any fluid to the system, or it's gonna go everywhere. This thing looks so much nicer in here than the booster did. Nice and tight up against that firewall. So much more room here. I'm gonna put that heat shield back for the downpipe, but it's so nice in here. Way, way better system to have in the engine bay. That's gonna wrap it up for today. Pretty easy install. If you like this video, smash that like button, drop a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.